The Spartan system was not limited to the government, but embraced a whole network of interrelated institutions that pervaded virtually every aspect of a Spartan man's life. We will discuss a few of the most conspicuous ones here, but keep in mind that there are many more to learn about that you will encounter in your reading. Please, do feel free to ask questions or make observations about how all these things might connect. You should know in advance that this lecture includes some rather grim details about the Spartans' treatment of their enslaved workforce. The most well-known and probably all-encompassing institution in Sparta was the agoge, which is a slightly difficult Greek word to translate. It means something like the training or the instruction. A Spartan boy lived with his mother until the age of 7, and then he was raised in the barracks and subject to daily military drills and sport training under the direction of older boys and adult Spartan men. At the age of 17, the boys, or paides, became paidiskoi, or young men, and they were able to lead younger boys in drills. In the late teens, certain select Spartan boys would be chosen to serve in the krypteia, which is a word that could be translated secret police. We don't know the details, but what we are told is that this club or division of young men was detailed to hunt down and assassinate potential agitators among the helots in order to keep the helots as a class in a state of perpetual terror. At the age of 20, a Spartan young man was ready to become a Spartiate, or a full Spartan citizen. He did this by joining a syssition. In Greek, syssition means something like a group that eats together, or a place where they eat together, and so it is usually translated mess, or mess hall. There was a limited number of Spartan messes, though we do not know what that exact number was. When a young man applied to join a particular mess, the existing members voted on whether to accept or reject him. The applicant could be blackballed, so one single vote to reject the applicant's membership was it for him. He was not allowed to join. If he was accepted, the member of the mess was required to eat with his messmates for every dinner, and he was also required to contribute food from his own farmland to the common meals. This means that there was a de facto property requirement for mess membership. If you did not have enough land to produce enough food for your mess, you could not be a mess member. The Spartan messes were the ultimate gatekeepers to full Spartiate status and Spartan citizenship. In order to exercise citizen rights and vote in the assembly, you had to be a member of a mess. If you were not a member of a mess, or you lost your membership, you were not a citizen. Once you joined a mess and enjoyed the full status of Spartan citizenship, you were allowed, as a Spartan citizen, to grow your hair long. That was the sign of being a male Spartan citizen. I'm rather interested in the location of these messes. They lined the Hyacinthian Way, if you remember that road from the previous lecture that connected the 4 main villages of Sparta with the southern village of Amyclae, the 5th village that was geographically cut off from its sister villages. Sparta, quote-unquote, had no wall. What it had, instead, to make the central settlement a cohesive whole, was the line of its own men eating and living together and connecting the constituent parts of their homeland together with their own comrades. I think that helps to bring into focus one of the major challenges that Sparta faced, a challenge that they never really addressed. Quite frankly, they had a shrinking population. It's not so much that there were fewer people being born among the Laconians. Rather, the stringent rules of admittance to full Spartiate status made it difficult for the citizen body to keep from shrinking, from having people falling out from one generation to the next. We do not know how many Spartiates there were at the height of its population. The philosopher Aristotle says that there were 10,000, but that's probably mythical. By the Persian Wars, there were about 5,000 Spartiates, a number that our admittedly incomplete evidence suggests steadily declined until there were fewer than 1,000 Spartan citizens in the army that fought Epaminondas at Leuctra. By that time, the whole rest of their army had to be filled out with draftees from among the Perioikoi, and also from mercenaries, hired from the proceeds that were brought in by the Spartan Harmosts. 60,000, compare this number, or rather these dwindling numbers, to our best estimates of the number of the Perioikoi, about 50,000, and the number of the Helots, about 60,000. And those numbers probably remained fairly steady. You can see why the Spartans were so violently desperate to protect their privileges. In a very real sense, the Spartans were parasites on the Laconian and Messenian populations. The stories that we have about the kings prior to the Persian Wars are probably largely legendary. One of the first dynastic dramas that does have firmer grounding in history gives an idea of how fraught the whole life of the monarch of the diarchy must have been. The Aeacid king Anaxandridas II had a wife who bore him no children. The ephors deemed this a succession crisis, and so they, as a council, demanded that the king divorce his wife and remarry. The king refused to do this. The king and the ephors sparred, and they finally reached a compromise by which the king agreed to take a second wife, which was not traditionally done among the Spartans or the rest of the Greeks. This second wife had a son named Cleomenes. But then, awkwardly enough, Anaxandridas's first wife began to have children too, 3 sons. This created a crisis of its own. Was Cleomenes the heir, since he was the eldest? Or was the eldest son of the first wife the heir, since Cleomenes was arguably illegitimate, and so not truly his father's heir? In the end, Cleomenes did become the next king. Cleomenes, however, had no sons of his own, but only a daughter named Gorgo. When Cleomenes died, the Aeacid kingship went to Cleomenes' younger brother, Leonidas, who was the eldest surviving son of Anaxandridas and his first wife. This, incidentally, is the Leonidas who died at Thermopylae. Leonidas married his niece Gorgo and produced the heir to the Aeacid dynasty. Fortunately for the Aeacid dynasty, this prevented the very unpleasant possibility of 2 separate branches of Anaxandridas' family from claiming the right to the kingship for themselves. At about the same time, things in the other royal family, the Eurypontids, were no less confused. The Eurypontid king Demaratus sabotaged Cleomenes' attempts to interfere in Athens' civil strife. I'll hopefully be able to talk more about this later. It's a fascinating story. So, Cleomenes got even with his co-king Demaratus by starting a very successful rumor that Demaratus' mother had actually already been pregnant with him by her first husband when she married the previous Eurypontid king. And that would mean that Demaratus was not really the king's heir. Cleomenes solidified the believability of this rumor when he bribed the Oracle of Delphi to declare Demaratus not truly the heir to the Eurypontid dynasty. A distant cousin on the agnatic or male line of the Eurypontid clan, named Leotychidas, was proclaimed the legitimate Eurypontid king. And Demaratus fled from Sparta, and he actually went to Persia and became a courtier of King Xerxes. Demaratus traveled together with Xerxes, and he served as Xerxes' advisor during the Persian invasion of Greece. Demaratus did this because he expected fully that the Persians would reinstate him as a king of Sparta when the Persians conquered Greece. That, of course, is not how things ended up happening.